well on this lovely Tuesday morning. Let's get the obligatory back of the net out of the way. Right, today I thought we'd jump into some cartoons as per. Let's see if I can make heads or tails about that. Probably not, as I usually can't. And then jump straight into something like the morning briefing from The Guardian. Get the kind of full lay of the land, stories-wise, and see what's going on. And then after that, there's a few different stories I want to look at. Something about Cummings. I think there's been another leak or some sort, or he's just put himself out there a bit. And then head over to BBC Politics as well, and see what's going on there. Alright. God, my eyes look fucked. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. So, here we go. Cartoons from the week to start us off. Right, so this will be easy enough for me, I think. So, Putin and Biden. Putin says, the last guy sat on my lap. Being Trump, obviously. It's a good one. Alright. Who's this? Governor Abbott. See, I don't know about this story. Build the grind? Heck. No, sorry, build the grid? Heck. Heck no. We're going to build the wall. That's my #1 priority. Give my message out to every home in Texas. And whoever this guy is saying, I would, sir. But the power is out in every home. No. I don't have a fucking clue, I'm afraid, about that one. Okay, next. Taking down the fake background. I'm going back to the office. So that's obviously Zoom calls. Post-lockdown. Wonder where that cartoon's from. I don't know, it seems like a British cartoon. Okay. So next one here. Who are these? See, I know how to compromise, he said, reaching out across the aisle. No, I wish I knew. I really do. Right. Wow, when did they build this wall? It's not a wall, it's a dam. Western drought. Let's figure it out. Something about... If I just Google Western drought, is that going to become obvious enough? I might just do a quick sound check again here, folks, actually, because that didn't sound great to me. How's the mic levels for you all? Let's have a look. I wonder. Right, how's that? That's better, isn't it? Ah, yeah, fantastic. Okay. Western drought. Here are some things to know about the drought in the West. Or the Western drought, if you will. Okay. Almost half of the US has been in a drought since the start of 2021. Christ, I didn't know that. That feels like something I should have known. Compounding factors including low rainfall and snowpack, climate change and persisting droughts from previous years have escalated into extreme dryness. The prolonged dryness means low water levels are endangering fish species in Oregon and Colorado. 30% of California's population is in a drought emergency. And the nation's two biggest reservoirs in the Colorado River, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, are 2/3 empty. Jesus. That is a real crisis. What we see in our major reservoirs on the Colorado River really give us a good indication of water and drought in the West, and whether we're in a good or tough spot, said Berggren, a water policy analyst at Western Resource Advocates, a non-profit organisation. And right now, we're definitely in the latter category. Jesus. Alright, so back to that cartoon again. Wow, when did they build this wall? It's not a wall, it's a dam. Which now makes a lot more sense to me, folks. Rest assured, I get it now. Right, another heat stroke victim. Sign says climate change is a hoax. Brilliant. Okay, so giant COVID. I'll have a big plate of anti-vaxxers and a side of vaccine hesitance. It's the Delta variant there. Jesus. I mean, this is it. This is it. I was having this chat yesterday. It's not just the fact that the vaccine rollout can't come soon enough. It's the fact that, you know, a lot of people, for various reasons, some obviously more conspiratorial than others, won't take the vaccine. And others are, as the cartoon says, hesitant. But that means that everybody else's immunity is risked by that. They put everybody else at danger, unfortunately. Whether that's an unfair statement or not, I'm not sure. But it's certainly true. This is how variants come about, because not enough people have a strong enough immune system to resist the virus and the current strains that we have. Here we go. More on this. Guys on the site says, "My body, my choice. It only counts when I say it." And then she's got, so that's a pro-choice advocate. My body, my choice. Different situation. Yeah, it is a hypocrisy. That's true.
That's funny and true. Right, Juneteenth, annual federal holiday celebrating black independence on the 19th. Umpteenth annual Republican failure to repeal Obamacare. And that's Lady Justice or something like that. I can't remember the name of that figure. Kicking off a Republican elephant. I only learned recently that elephants were the symbol of the Republic and donkeys were the symbol of the Democrats. I wonder why that is actually. Let's have a look. Why are Republican elephants? Let's take a look. Let's go to the BBC for this one. Actually, is that a video? Maybe I can watch a video about it. Let's have a look. That's another thing I'd like to know. The blue and red. There you go. I'll learn it all in one go here, folks. A lot of learning for me this morning. This is what the stream is all about, by the way. I don't claim to be any kind of political expert of any kind. I'm much more interested in just learning, essentially, having a conversation when it happens. So yeah, I have knowledge of this and that, but in general, really, I am much more interested in just kind of, causing bad internet problems. Much more interested in just, opening up the channels and the channels of my mind as well. So, right, here we go. Let's take a look at this. Oh, this is the Vsauce guy, right? I recognise this guy. Is that him? Apologies, it's loading incredibly slow. Take it back there. Right, let's find out.
So ubiquitous is the red-blue color scheme in today's US political discourse that many assume such a system has been around as long as we have had Republicans and Democrats. In fact, the opposite is true. The dichotomy is relatively young, having only become settled with the presidential election of 2000. In order to make political reporting more interesting and to help viewers more easily discern the leanings of a particular party, colours are often assigned according to the party's ideology. Black, because of its association with Mussolini's black shirts as well as Hitler's SS, internationally black typically designates a fascist or anarchic party. In the 1960s and 70s in the US, however, the Socialist Black Panther Party, BPP, adopted black for its colour. Blue. Unlike in the USA, conservative parties internationally are typically identified with blue. This tradition is reputed to have begun in Great Britain, where the Tories adopted blue as their colour circa 1900 in response to Labour's use of red. Green. In the Muslim world, because green was supposedly Muhammad's favourite colour, it is frequently adopted by Islamist political parties. Hamas, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the Islamic Republic of Iran all use green on their flags. In other places, particularly Western Europe and the Americas, green is used to designate environmental parties such as the Green Party of the United States. Red. As with blue, the rest of the world typically uses red to designate a more liberal, left-leaning party, including everything from progressive and pro-Labour parties to socialists and communists. This tradition apparently began with the French Revolution of 1848, when a red flag was used to represent the blood of angry workers. This brings us to party colour in the United States. Before the year 2000, consistent with international usage, conservative groups in the United States were affiliated with blue and left-leaning groups were designated red. So well accepted were these denominations that following the Bolshevik Russian Revolution of 1917 and then again during the 1950s, when Senator Joseph McCarthy conducted a witch hunt against supposed American communists, these events were known as the First and Second Red Scare, times when the right were scared out of their wits, according to two-time Pulitzer Prize winner Walter Lippmann, who incidentally was the first to outline the concept of the Cold War, as well as introduce the modern psychological definition of stereotype, which, previous to his usage, was primarily a printing press term for a duplicating printing plate. The more you know. Red remains a pejorative in American political discourse through much of the 20th century because of its association with communism, and neither party would voluntarily associate with it. As NBC's Chuck Todd said, "For years, both parties would do red and blue maps, but they always made the other guys red. During the Cold War, who wanted to be red?" Things began to change when the ability of news outlets to display graphical information leapt forward in the 1970s. When reporting the results of the presidential election of 1976, Time magazine's electoral map designated states won by Republican Gerald Ford as white and those won by Democrat Jimmy Carter as red. However, for the next election in 1980, Time's editors had switched the colors such that the states won by the Democratic incumbent were white and those won by Republican Ronald Reagan were red. Presumably, the more vibrant color was intended to identify the winner of the election rather than its ideology. For its coverage of the 1980 presidential election, NBC's broadcast included an electoral map that designated states carried by the Republican candidate as blue and those won by the Democrat as red. Anchor David Brinkley described Reagan's landslide victory of that year by referencing the graphic. "It's beginning to look like a suburban swimming pool." NBC maintained these colors for the presidential parties until the presidential election of 2000. The other networks forged their own paths when covering presidential elections. In 1976, ABC used blue for states won by the Democratic candidate and yellow for the Republican, but by 1984 it had switched the Republican color to red. CBS designated Democratic wins with red and Republican with blue in 1980, but then flipped them in 1984. As vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, Geraldine Ferraro described the reporting of the 1984 election. "One network map of the United States was entirely blue for the Republicans. On another network, the color motive was a blanket of red." This all brings us to the 2000 presidential election. Like the 2012 contest, the country was nearly evenly divided in the popular vote, and prognosticators were all over the map with their predictions. Political coverage leading up to the election dominated both broadcast and cable news. By this election, NBC had settled on blue to represent states won by Democrats and red to designate those won by the Republicans. Tim Russert, the popular and respected moderator of Meet the Press, regularly appeared on NBC's then top-rated Today Show to analyze the contest. It is rumored that he coined the terms red state and blue state on its October 30th broadcast. Coverage continued unabated through the election on November 7th, and that's when things got really interesting. The race was too close to call, particularly in Florida. The Sunshine State's
Fraudulent.
25 electoral votes would put either candidate over the 270 threshold needed to win the presidency. Because the candidates were separated by merely 900 votes on the first count, a mandatory recount was ordered, which became the hand count in 4 counties. While people obsessed over
I've recommended it many times before, but I'll recommend it again. A great documentary on Netflix called Get Me Roger Stone, which talks about how political advisor and strategist Roger Stone essentially helped to push that result for the Republicans over the line by doing things including forcibly trapping Democrat voters outside one of the polling booths at the deadline. Great documentary. Shocking, but well worth a watch.
hanging chads, the electoral system, and Katherine Harris, television broadcasters repeated the red state, blue state mantra ad nauseum. By the time the Supreme Court crowned George W. Bush the 43rd President of the United States on the 12th of December 2000, in Bush and Gore, the dichotomy was ingrained in the American psyche. Today, if a reporter uses any other color scheme to describe the electoral landscape of the US, it is considered a grievous error. As one journalist for Slate, who purposefully reversed the colors and had to correct his story, put it, "I didn't realize it had become so official. I must have missed the memo." And now for a bonus fact. Ever wonder how the donkey and elephant came to represent Republicans and Democrats? Well, wonder no more. The 1828 presidential election between Republican, not to be confused with the modern Republican Party, which was formed a few decades later, John Quincy Adams, and Democrat Andrew Jackson, is still considered one of the dirtiest campaigns ever run in American politics. Jackson and his supporters called Adams corrupt, spoiled, and a libertine, someone who lacked moral restraint, usually in reference to sexual matters. Adams' supporters attacked Jackson's military record, his violent temper, his disrespect for authority, and most unfairly, his wife for marrying Jackson before she was properly divorced. Earlier, Jackson killed a man for issuing the same insult. They also called Jackson a jackass, comparing him to a stubborn, dumb donkey. Jackson was famously known as a populist, and his slogan, "Let the people rule," reinforced this. Republicans claimed that if the people ruled, it would be a bunch of jackasses ruling the country. But Andrew Jackson, the savvy politician he was, turned the jackass into a positive symbol. He pointed out the virtues of being a jackass in campaign addresses, persistence, loyalty, and the ability to carry a heavy load. It also symbolized humble origins and simplistic virtues, an ode to the common man. This helped Jackson further differentiate himself from
It's fucking clever.
the aristocratic Adams. Jackson wanted to be the president of choice for everyday citizens. He soon put the donkey on his campaign posters and referenced it in speeches. Jackson continued to be associated with a donkey even after his presidency, when an 1837 political cartoon depicted him attempting to lead a donkey who refused to follow. This was to show that the Democratic Party, the donkey, would not be led by the previous president, Jackson. From here, the donkey only made rare appearances as the symbol for Democrats until later in the century. The elephant, as the Republican symbol, now referring to the modern Republican Party, first made an appearance during the 1864 presidential election in a pro-Lincoln newspaper, Father Abraham. Really, this was more political propaganda than newspaper, though of course the same could be said for a large percentage of news outlets throughout history, and even today when it comes to politics. Father Abraham depicted an elephant carrying a banner and celebrating Union victories in the war. At the time, the well-known slang phrase, "seeing the elephant," meant to engage in combat. So how did these two animals go from here to popularly representing the Democrats and the Republicans? This is thanks to famed political cartoonist Thomas Nast. Nast started becoming famous with the onset of the Civil War in 1861. He was working for Harper's Weekly at the time and illustrated over 55 engravings of battles and war scenes. In December of 1862, Nast debuted his version of Santa Claus, the jolly old fat man in a red suit that we now know today. Prior to Nast's depiction of Saint Nick, he was always shown as more of a religious figure and much less jolly. Later, in the political arena, he called out Boss Tweed's political machine, helped get
So this guy's basically responsible for two major changes then. So he's the elephant guy and he's the Jolly Saint Nick guy. What's that name again? I'm going to note that down.
slang phrase, seeing the elephant meant to engage in combat. So how did these two animals go from here to popularly representing the Democrats and the Republicans? This is thanks to famed political cartoonist Thomas Nast. Nast started becoming famous with the onset of the Civil War in 1861. He was working for Harper's Weekly at the time and illustrated over 55 engravings of battles and war scenes. In December of 1862, Nast debuted his version of Santa Claus, the jolly old fat man in a red suit that we now know today. Prior to Nast's depiction of St. Nick, he was always shown as more of a religious figure and much less jolly. Later, in the political arena, he called out Boss Tweed's political machine, helped get Ulysses Grant elected president, and brought to light the savagery of the Ku Klux Klan's campaigns against African Americans. He also, as mentioned, popularized the donkey as the symbol for the Democrats and the elephant as the Republican symbol. In a cartoon called A Live Jackass Kicking a Dead Lion that ran in an 1870 issue of Harper's Weekly, he used the donkey to represent the Copperhead Democrats, a faction of Northern Democrats that were in opposition to the Civil War. In it, a donkey is kicking a dead lion who was a stand-in for the recently deceased Secretary of War, Edwin M. Stanton. Nast thought Copperhead Democrats were anti-union and believed the press's treatment of Stanton to be disrespectful. In 1871, the Republican elephant made another appearance, this time in a Nast cartoon in Harper's Weekly, to remind Republicans that their intra-party fighting could cause them to lose the election. The 1874 cartoon, entitled Third Term Panic, really solidified the symbolism for both animals. Ulysses S. Grant, whom Nast was a supporter and good friend of, had been president for 2 terms, elected in 1868 and again in 1872, and was contemplating a run for a 3rd term. It wouldn't be until 1951 and the 22nd Amendment that a term limit was placed on the presidency, thanks in no small part to FDR's 4-term run as president. The New York Herald very much opposed Grant's potential run and wrote several articles complaining of Caesarism, meaning military or imperial dictatorship. In Third Term Panic, it shows a donkey wearing the skin of a lion with Caesarism emblazoned on it, scaring off other animals, including a wobbly, unbalanced elephant, labeled as the Republican vote about to fall into a pit, labeled Inflation and Chaos. Though Grant didn't end up running, Nast's cartoon didn't do enough to prevent the Herald's Caesarism claims from working. The Republicans ended up losing control of the House in the election, and Nast showed his disappointment with another cartoon in November of that year, an elephant caught in a trap that was set by a donkey. Thanks to Nast, by 1880, the donkey and the elephant became the accepted symbols used by other political cartoonists and writers for the two political parties, and the association has stuck around ever since. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always...
That is fascinating. Thank you very much. Today I find out. Right, so there you go. That's why every other cartoon uses the donkey and the elephant. Here we go. Jeff Bezos, isn't it? Ready, Mr. Bezos? Yes, on to space. The final frontier where no billionaire has gone before, to explore new tax shelters, to infinity and beyond the reach of the IRS. It'll be him and it'll be Musk. 2 billionaires against Earth. Here we go. They stopped the steal. Supreme Court. The sign says Americans can keep Obamacare. I don't know enough about the fight around Obamacare. Presumably it's come back up yet again. This is Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci saying, "Hey, hot mama." This woman says, "Get lost, twerp," and he says, "You shouldn't attack science." Right, we've had that one. We had that one last time. Alright, we're up to speed. Let's jump into some news. So let's start with the Tuesday briefing from The Guardian and get a bit of everything from around the world. Well, that the Guardian deems important anyway. The top story here, Labour MP claims data cherry-picked. White working class pupils have been let down by the education system in England, with divisive terms such as white privilege contributing to the neglect, a controversial report by MP says today. The study by the Conservative-dominated Commons Education Committee rejected the government's view that poverty is solely to blame for white working class underperformance, and said that while an industry has emerged to support disadvantaged non-white pupils, the same is not available to white pupils. It's interesting. But the report will ignite controversy after one Labour member disowned the conclusions and accused members of stirring a culture war. It's interesting because while there is a culture war, and there's another story here that kind of backs this up, the Tories are definitely, in a large part, responsible for the culture war. It's becoming an easy accusation to make, I think. Well, I know it's an easy accusation to make. That, you know, any kind of intervention and any kind of observation about racial difference now in the UK, culture war is going to be a bit of a go-to rebuttal, a go-to kind of objection to it. So it's one to watch, I think. And, you know, I kind of, like I said, whilst there is a real culture war, we kind of need to be aware of these terms hindering our discourse rather than helping it. Anyhow, Kim Johnson, Labour MP for Liverpool Riverside, said she was unhappy with a lot of the report and said the committee had cherry-picked data. The report is the latest to claim that education has been a success story for ethnic minorities. It repeatedly refers to a Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities report in March that claimed children from many ethnic communities largely do as well as white children. But this is despite many other studies, including Guardian Analysis, finding widespread racial discrimination in the education system. Yes, that's success on two different metrics, isn't it? It's success in the academic sense of test performance, and it's success in the other sense, which is the social success of schools. Do kids from ethnic minorities actually have a good time at school, or are they just doing well in tests? Euro outbreak. Go on, a bit of football news. It all mixes in anyway. England footballers Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell have been forced to self-isolate after coming into close contact with Scotland player Billy Gilmour when the teams played last week. Gilmour, a Chelsea club colleague of the England players, tested positive for COVID-19 yesterday. The England pair could still play in tonight's final Euro 2020 group game against the Czech Republic at Wembley, but coach Gareth Southgate said they were quite a doubt. Gilmour is isolating for 10 days and will miss Scotland's must-win game against Croatia at Hampden Park. Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi has called for the Euro 2020 final to be moved from Wembley to Rome because of the rising number of cases in the UK. Fair enough. Politically motivated, but fair enough. The political fallout from the spike continued at home, as the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham described as totally disproportionate a decision by Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon to ban travel north of the border for people from the northwest of England. In the US, deaths from coronavirus have dipped below 300 a day for the first time since last March. Good news. Right, let's have a look at this Andy Burnham and Nicola Sturgeon banter, because what I find quite interesting is he's got a good point. But I saw someone on stream yesterday jumping on him for overreacting or something like that. From my perspective, I think he's more pissed off, not solely by the fact that Sturgeon has done this and imposed a kind of travel ban to Manchester, but more of the fact that the North, since the start of the pandemic, has very much been thrown under the bus by the government. And, you know, Sturgeon's not really part of that, but I think he's kind of looking for a scapegoat and maybe reacting at the wrong person, I suppose. I know that Bolton earlier in the year, I say earlier in the year, I think it was only about a month ago, maybe 2, was suddenly put onto a list of places that the government said you shouldn't go in or out of, that overnight citizens of Bolton woke up and that was the case. I think I remember seeing that the councillors weren't told as well, but I could be wrong about that. But the point is that the North has been thrown into these kind of restrictions that hurt the economy of the North and, you know, impact the social lives as well, and kind of mental health and a lot of aspects of different things of people in the North, often disproportionately to those in the South. And whilst that's largely due to there being a lot more COVID cases in these parts of the North, often there hasn't been any lead up to it or transparency or communication with those people. It's usually been a case of Westminster just saying, this is it now, deal with it. And Andy Burnham's right to call that out. And I feel like that has also fueled his anger when it comes to this. So Greater Manchester Mayor says move totally disproportionate, given case rate in Bolton is lower than Dundee. That's interesting. That is interesting. I didn't know that. So that kind of changes everything. Okay. Andy Burnham has called on Nicola Sturgeon to justify the totally disproportionate travel ban between the northwest of England and Scotland in an open letter. The Mayor of Greater Manchester intervened after Sturgeon extended the ban on non-essential travel. It was already in place for Bolton and Blackburn with Darwen, to Manchester and Salford on Friday. In the letter, which was copied to all MSPs and posted on Twitter, Burnham expressed concerns about the restrictions imposed and the manner in which they were announced. Yeah, so that manner being basically without any kind of consultation with Burnham. So this quote here, it was disappointing that neither you nor your officials thought it was appropriate to contact us to discuss the proposals or provide advanced warning of the announcement, he said. Challenging Sturgeon to justify the non-essential travel ban policy, he added, I would be grateful if you could set out in detail what criteria you are using. Why is Bolton under a travel ban today when it has a case rate that is quite a lot lower than Dundee? How is that fair? There's another tweet here from the office of the Mayor of Greater Manchester. Our 2.8 million residents deserve to be treated with due respect and proper consideration when restrictions are being implemented which will affect their lives. Let's have a look. Should we have a look at the full letter? Let's have a look at the full letter here. I feel like I haven't been on Twitter for a while, actually. I don't try to avoid it, but it just hasn't happened. So slow. Sorry, folks. I'm going to ring up my internet provider later and see what's going on. Because I've upgraded recently. And yet, we get shit like this. Slower than ever. So I don't know. Hoofed. Let's have it. What I enjoy is the kind of, you'll see it in a second, the scribbled Dear First Minister, and then best wishes Andy, and then the rest just all typed out. It's obviously the way that politicians are supposed to do their letters, I suppose, but it seems so. Like, well, you'll see the scribble in a second. It's just like, it implies that somebody from his office has just typed out this brilliant letter, and then he's just gone, "Dear First Minister" on the top. Alright, so "Dear First Minister," you see what I mean? It's very scribbled. As you know, I am concerned about travel restrictions imposed by the Scottish Government on people from a number of areas in Greater Manchester, and the manner in which they were announced. Firstly, I appreciate how, during the pandemic, those in positions of responsibility have had to make difficult and unprecedented decisions, often at short notice. However, it was disappointing that neither you nor your officials thought it appropriate to contact us to discuss the proposals or provide any advance warning of the announcement. If Westminster had, without notice, imposed a travel ban on Scotland on Friday, I feel certain you would have expressed your public opposition to that, and, in the same way, I have raised my concerns on behalf of the residents of Greater Manchester. When he's right, he's right. There are a number of questions that arise from the decisions you have taken, decision you have taken. First, what criteria are you using? I love that use of bold. Use of bold in a letter. Don't see that very often. I would be grateful if you would set out in detail what criteria you are using to determine the non-essential travel ban policy. On the latest government figures, Bolton has a COVID-19 case rate of 269 per 100,000 and decreasing, whilst Dundee has a rate of 319 as of 15th of June. And he's linked to the government website there. However, Bolton residents are still subject to a travel ban, whilst Dundee residents are not. How is this consistent and fair, and what is the justification for continuing the ban on Bolton residents? It's funny, when he puts forth all the evidence, he does make a very convincing case. It almost makes it seem like this was something that was done quite quickly by Sturgeon and the team, and now will be a bit of a, oh shit, we should have thought about that more moment. But I feel like they have to double down, right? They can't relent. What's your opinion on Laurel Hubbard? VKH, thanks for joining, by the way. I don't actually know that name, Laurel Hubbard. Shall I look it up? I'm here to learn. How are you doing today? Laurel Hubbard, first trans athlete to compete at Olympics. Give me your view while I load this up and have a read. What's your view on it? So, Hubbard has been included in New Zealand's weightlifting team. I am grateful and humbled, says 43-year-old in statement. I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, I haven't been awake very long. You can probably tell by... In fact, my eyes aren't looking too bad now. I was looking very blurred earlier. But no, I'm good. Right, the New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard is poised to make history and headlines, as well as significant controversy, after being confirmed as the first transgender athlete to compete at the Olympic Games. At any Olympic Games, should I say. The 43-year-old will be the fourth oldest weightlifter at the Olympics, is regarded as a genuine medal contender in the women's super heavyweight 87 kg plus category in Tokyo. But while her inclusion has been welcomed by trans groups, it has also been questioned by those who believe she has an unfair advantages in strength and power, having gone through male puberty before transitioning in 2012. Right, okay. I have an image of the stats, and Laurel is dominating as the oldest weightlifter and is taking away achievements from the women below Laurel. Okay, so the first thing to say is I've never actually been asked about this issue. Been asked about various issues around trans community in the past, but this issue is one that has kind of eluded me. And I did think at one point, the thought has crossed my mind that I don't really have a cemented position on it. So you say they are getting too progressive to the point where it is impeding on women's rights. This situation is certainly one where I can see that argument, because for sport, and I feel about this situation differently than I had probably a couple of years ago. So in the last couple of years, I've realised, and this seems like an obvious statement now that I say it out loud, but I've kind of realised how significant sport is for so many different things for people that are involved in it. Now, for that reason, Ozymandias Visage, how you doing? What are your political stances? Right, as well, so I'm talking about my political stance on one thing. I'll talk more generally in a second. So VKH has just raised an issue of the first trans athlete in the Olympics, I believe, which is the story here. It's a weightlifter who, if I'm being brash, I think she was born male and has transitioned to female. So you say, imagine how second places feel that a man took first place away from her. These women work so hard and Laurel is only winning because Laurel is a man. Yeah, it's difficult to argue against that, to be honest. I think what I think is that there should be some way for trans athletes to be taking part in the category they transition into, but I don't know what that is. I really don't. I couldn't begin to tell you. There's so many reasons that it's incredibly difficult to ever achieve. There's no argument, it's not subjective. I see your point. Objectively, there are physical characteristics that make men much more adept to sports like weightlifting. But then what do we say? Is the answer to that inclusion for trans people ends with sport? I don't know. Because that seems like we just then say that we'll have that debate for the rest of our lives. I feel like there has to be a way in. I just don't know what it is. Ozymandias, by the way, how are you doing? How's your day going, or evening? Thank you for joining us. So you say put Laurel in trans league or men's league. So you think there should be a trans league? That's an interesting one. The only question then is, do you still open it up to the same concerns of putting people who are born female and people who are born male together? Or LGBT league? Yeah, but that wouldn't work because that's people who identify as male then as well, and people who identify as female, you know? Ozymandias, you say LGBTQ league? No, I'm glad you're good, by the way. What's the solution here? What's the solution that... And I don't want a solution that benefits the most people, because that's often not the best solution. what's the solution that avoids hurt and avoids pain and means that we resolve it and don't leave it open to something that's going to be debated forever, I wonder. Trans maybe, but you can't also throw in gays and bis in there. That's kind of homophobic. Yeah, I see, definitely see that. You couldn't have a LGBTQ league. That wouldn't work. Because then you're talking about an identity rather than a gender. Maybe trans men's league and trans women's league. Yeah, it's, again, imperfect, but maybe a better solution than this. I'm not sure. Ozymandias, what's your take on that? Trans men's league and a trans women's league? I think, if I'm being devil's advocate, the most obvious problem that springs up to me with that is that you are still, I suppose, asking people to cement themselves into one identity. But then I suppose that's what's happening here in a sense. Or maybe male with gender identity disorder league and female with gender identity disorder league. So there's zero confusion. Yeah, but then it's not, and I'm no expert, but I do know that not everybody that transitions does so because of what they see as gender identity disorder. I don't think also that in order to transition, again, I'm no expert, so I am talking out my arse, but so I'll shut up eventually about this very point. But I'm fairly sure in order to transition, you don't have to be diagnosed, as it were, with gender identity disorder. Male GID league, female GID league. I definitely see your point. Ozymandias. Laura's gender is woman, but she is biologically speaking a man. These instances of trans women's sports have been used as a tool to hurt the trans community. The reality is that this really is a non-problem. But if it really is a problem, there could 100% be mandates for how much estrogen is necessary to participate in women's sports. Right, so that is something that I have heard of, actually. And maybe that's the way in to this, and maybe that's the solution, do you think? That's something I'd be interested to read more about, actually. Maybe I'll do that here. I think there has to be a solution. Especially because, as I say, in the last couple of years, my opinion on sport has changed massively. Before, to be honest, when I thought of this issue, I think I hadn't paid attention, and this is a self-criticism. I hadn't paid enough attention because I thought sport doesn't necessarily matter to me. And, you know, sport to me wasn't an important part of the conversation when it came to this. But seeing, especially with the pandemic and how when people can't participate in sport, it genuinely hurts them and hurts their mental health. Sorry, I sound like I'm getting choked up, but I'm not. Seeing how much it affects them to not be able to play sport, and how sport is a route out of poverty as well, and so many other things. I see that this is something that really we do need to discuss, and we need to find a solution that allows trans people to take part in sport. Okay, so you guys have run away with the ball somewhere else here. I'm going to have to catch up. You're just kind of transphobic, not going to lie. That's not to me, I don't think. Is it? Feel free to tell me if that's to me, because I can refute that then. Even if a man has low tests, he will still have the advantages from male puberty, and even if you don't go through male puberty, men still have larger lungs, heart, red blood cells, large skeletal structure, etc. So that's the objective physical differences. no, that's a leftist ideology. Gender is not malleable. If one man joins the Women's League, then many more people are getting hurt. This is true is the case of trans people who did not take puberty blockers and estrogen over other kids. No, it was a reply. Right, you weren't calling me transphobic. No one will get hurt. There is no need to fear Mongia. I definitely see your point, Ozymandias, that issues like this, the way that they're dealt with, it definitely seems like it's being weaponized quite a lot. I was having a discussion yesterday with somebody. I say discussion. I, as a relatively new streamer in the kind of political field, was jumping in and kind of talking with other political streamers, and there was a fellow who, it wouldn't be fair to name them even if I could remember their name, but they were talking about the trans bathroom debate, to put it one way, and that to me is another example of something that is clearly being weaponized by people who don't want to see equality for trans people, because especially when you look at the data, nothing in that data suggests that any variation of the bathroom system will have any impact on crime at all. In fact, the biggest learning for me was that many states have already implemented what Republicans largely argue against, which is this idea of letting people choose. That's already happened and it hasn't had any impact on anything. So it's a complete myth that it creates some kind of, breeding ground for crime. It's complete bollocks. And that's another issue that's been weaponized clearly to hurt the equal rights of trans people. VKH, thank you very much for the follow. I really appreciate that. Really, really appreciate that. You sound very calm and smart. Thank you. Ozymandias Visage, thank you very much for the follow. Really appreciate that. Thank you. VKH, you've said the transgender movement is a cult and the LGBT community is indoctrinating children. The problem with that is, and the reason that that's offensive, is because there is not objectively negative things that happen to people when they enter the LGBT community. And you are born this way too, remember. Science has proven, and obviously anybody in the LGBT community already knew, but science has proven that you are born as part of that community. You are born with that direction. So then why are transgender cases shooting up as of recent years? Because now they have the ability to transition. Science has made that much more possible than it was before. I believe that is why. Anyway, there is cases going back as early as the 1800s, and somebody shared a letter recently on social media, which is, and I'm saying social media is not really a reliable source, of course, but you can find cases from as early as then with people with either gender dysphoria or people who, at that point, because science didn't allow them to transition, people just living their lives in different, either different clothing or different, calling themselves a different gender, and their family is accepting it as well in different cases, and therefore everybody around them are just treating them that way. Now it's the case that I think often you don't really get this transgender identity, and it's not, put across in official documents and that kind of thing, unless you are able to transition. Now that you're able to transition, as it were, and all the things that entails scientifically, I think that's why the cases say it would go up, I believe. I probably won't read out all replies in the chat. I'll probably just read out just the messages. Yes, but children's minds are very gullible, so you can mold it. Yes, I see what you mean. There is definitely... I definitely find myself conflicted when we get into the age side of things. And whilst I think people should be able to transition, that's my general stance. However, I also see the idea of, say, a very young child transitioning as worrying as a possibility, because, as you say, children's minds are very, you can go all over the place, as it were, to use a kind of flippant term. And they must be 13, I believe, Ozymandias. So do you know how they came onto that age, I wonder? I wonder if we know that, and why it is 13. Have you heard autistic girls are at record numbers for being transgender? It's because the left preys on people who are not happy or comfortable with their lives, so they give them an easy answer. But it's not a leftist movement. Transitioning hasn't come about because leftists wanted it. It's that scientific development is kind of removed from politics. I think that the left is a lot more accommodating to people that want to transition. But this idea of preying on people, nobody's going out there and questioning whether or not somebody is, wants to be a man or wants to be a woman. These aren't people that are have been provoked into thinking a certain way. And even if there is a few cases of that, I think in the large part, from my perspective, in terms of representation, I'd be happy to know that there are young people that are feeling like they're in the wrong skin and can see that it's possible for them to achieve their true identity that they feel more akin to. It should be 25, so there's no indoctrination or child abuse. Yeah, where does the age come from? It's like Hitler said. This is you make me want to not read the rest of the sentence when you say that. It's like Hitler said, if you say a lie enough times, people will start to believe it, and especially kids. Did Hitler say that? Let me Google that. I feel like we're giving Hitler too much credit. Someone very close to Hitler. Repeat a lie often enough and it becomes the truth. There's a law of propaganda often attributed to the Nazi Joseph Goebbels. So yeah, I can see why you got that confused with Hitler, for sure. So you're saying this I don't think you can attribute, but they're not lies. These aren't lies that we're saying about the transgender community. These are proven cases. You know, even though, like I said, I don't think that you have to have gender identity disorder as a condition to being able to transition, but it's a recognised scientific disorder. 25 or not only would be horrible because of puberty already being done, also they must live with dysphoria. It would also mean that legal age of an adult would be 25. Right, so this is why it's 13, right? I'm going to scroll in case you've answered this already. I think that must be why it's 13, because of puberty. That's becoming obvious to me now as I speak. Transgender ideology was popularised by a left-wing pedo called John Money. That's not true. As I said, go back as far as 1800s and you can see people living as what we now know as transgender. This person, I'm sure, has some kind of influence. Clearly you've heard of him. But whatever the truth of that person's reach, remember that there have always been people that live like this. And just like there are cases of gay people going back as far as, you know, the Roman Empire, all of these things can be jumped on and used by a particular group or particular movement, but it doesn't mean that they came from there. 25 is when the brain is fully developed. People can experience gender dysphoria as early as 10. Trans kids have a high suicide rate. That's very true. So they are consolidated at 13. They are only given puberty blockers that are. Then at 16, they will get testosterone/estrogen, and at 18 plus, they as an adult can make the decision for an operation. Got you. Right. Okay, thanks for explaining that. The gender identity disorder is telling them they are the opposite sex. Should we tell people with eating disorders to stop eating? Because their disorder is telling them that they are not fat. In reality, they are telling them they are fat, when in reality, they are not. That's not what the eating disorder is telling them, first of all, though, remember. And you can have eating disorders that go both ways. You can have eating disorders where you don't eat, and you can have eating disorders when you eat too much. And the gender identity disorder is more or less the same in a sense. It's not a definitive label of you are a different sex. And that's why I said not all trans people. Ozymandias, I feel like you know more than me about this, maybe, so you can confirm this possibly. But I feel like gender identity disorder and trans and being trans are not one and the same. I don't think all trans people have gender identity disorder, as it were. VKH, I feel like I don't want to seem like I'm jumping on you. I just think that, you know, we're talking about one specific thing, I think. And I don't know if you can conflate it with other disorders, as it were. Especially, I suppose, maybe to do with identity, maybe you can, other identity disorders. But as I say, I don't think that's true for all trans people. Treatment of a mental disorder is not an ideology. How is a cure for gender identity disorder giving the disorder what it wants? Wouldn't a cure mean getting rid of the disorder by making it so they believe they are the sex they actually are? Yes, but should we encourage the eating disorder? No, because they will die. It is encouraging gender identity disorder leads to suicide. Yeah, but I don't think being told that you have gender identity disorder then makes you commit suicide. I think having gender identity disorder and it not being treatable and you feeling like the only thing stopping you from killing yourself is not being able to transition, I think that's the symptom. Gender identity is the diagnosis. I don't think having the diagnosis makes you want to kill yourself. I've never heard of somebody, being told something about themselves that they kind of in their heart believe to be true anyway, and kind of hearing it for the first time. I don't think that usually pushes somebody over the edge. If anything, it's the first step to them being helped, I think. Just going to pour some coffee. Again, no hate towards people with gender identity disorder. It's just I hate the disorder. I hate all disorders. Tell me if this is right. I'm feeling from what you say that you are not a fan of the label as such, and you would rather people aren't given this kind of disorder banner for various reasons. Tell me if that's right. Where is everybody joining us from today? Where are you guys in the world? I have a dislike for all disorders. As in, you don't like them being called disorders? Or you don't like the people that have the disorders? It's like I have Asperger's and wish I could cure it. You have Asperger's? Do you? I was saying to you do have Asperger's and you wish you could cure it. Is that what you're saying? Sorry, VKH. So do you think that you wish that you could cure your Asperger's? Is that what you're saying? No, by transgender ideology, the treatment would be people accept my symptoms, but that's not a cure. A cure would be actually fix the disorder. And then Ozymandias, treatment for a disorder is not encouragement, and I don't know why the right, or anyone for that matter, would think otherwise than to push down the trans community. Yeah, I have to agree on that point. As I said before, I think identifying a disorder and treating a disorder is the only solution out of something. The only other options are to leave somebody untreated and undiagnosed, which is only going to make the problem worse, or punish those people and shame those people, as in the kind of, gay, what am I trying to say? The gay, anti-gay camps and treatments and that kind of horrible thing. A cure would be eliminate all symptoms of a disorder to eliminate the cause and all aspects of the disorder. All right, I have to go now. Thank you for joining us. I think, I'm upset to hear, to be honest, that you wish you could cure your Asperger's, because I think there is a lot of benefit things that you offer society, genuinely. And I hope that you take care, and I don't want you to hate yourself. I really appreciate the follow. I live with Asperger's and I'm telling you, it's fucking hell. I'm not denying your experience. I'm really not. I don't want you to think that. I'm just saying, I wish you well and that I value you. So, take care. Hopefully I'll see you on another stream if you're jumping off now. Your main simp. What did you get your dad for Father's Day? I don't know how to answer that question. I said Happy Father's Day. I don't really do a lot of holidays throughout the year, I must be honest. Maybe that's because I'm such a lefty. Your main simp, thank you for joining. How are you doing? I love your username. How's your day going? Or evening? Ozymandias says, to eliminate gender dysphoria would be equivalent to transitioning people with gender dysphoria. I'm so sorry you endure... Sorry, my blur's coming up. I can't see the message. I'm so sorry that... Oh my god, why can't I see anything? Sorry, folks. I think you've said a nice message there, I just can't read it. I'm so sorry you have to endure Asperger's. Yeah, I really wish them well. It's not good to be in a position where you feel that you have to change. Especially because, as we learn more about Asperger's, it's clear to me anyway that there's so much that somebody with Asperger's can offer society. He must be so proud of you for getting called up to the national team. You deserved it. After this season with Dortmund. What's this? Is this like an in-joke? Because I'm not getting it. Your main simp. What did you get your father for Father's Day? What am I missing? Please start making sense. Do I look like a footballer? Is that the joke? Do I look like a particular footballer? Because I'll never catch on if it is, because I don't know any of them. Are you Jadon Sancho? And I got him a round of golf. What's going on? Who is that? Look. Do you think I look like this dude? I do, don't I, a bit? I've got his hair anyway. I had a haircut yesterday, and it didn't look like this until yesterday. Until yesterday. So I didn't really look like Jadon Sancho yesterday. But I definitely see your point. Look at that. No, other way. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you've got it. You bang on, mate. Jadon Sancho. Who's he play for then? you say? Dortmund. I'm not a football guy. Your main simp. That is a great observation. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I got the haircut. I got a haircut yesterday from a new barber. It's the same place, a different guy, because my barber's left and he's started up his own firm. It's really annoying because there's like this unspoken barber's code where supposedly you're just not allowed to, I don't think you're allowed to tell your customer where you're going for your next, your next business venture, as this guy is, or which barbershop you're moving to, because you're essentially saying, after I leave this place, sack this place off and come to, Joe's Barbers across the street where I'll be, or something like that. So I don't know where this guy's gone. But this guy hasn't really done what I like, this new guy. It's not really... Personally, I think you look like Gerald from Hey Arnold. I get that a lot. And my hair used to be a lot bigger as well. I'm not going to make the effort to try and find any pictures on Facebook for obvious reasons, but I used to get that a lot as well. Sabalo Raballo. Thank you for joining. Ah, you like it? Thank you. Yeah, this is my shape now. He's done an alright job. I'm not going to diss him. Hey, thank you for the follow. Really appreciate that. Yeah, he's done an okay job. I'm not going to diss him too much. I just think, I don't know, I like my guy. Now that we seem to be done with the trans discourse, what are your political views? So I end up verging to the left with a lot of the different issues. I'm having I'm not having a crisis, that's very dramatic, but I find myself more, less liberal than I thought with a lot of things. And it's moments like this when we talk about the trans issue and of sport, and I find myself unable to get past certain hurdles, like with the sport thing. But that's why I appreciate talking to people like yourself who provide me with a kind of a better understanding of how it works, so that I can kind of think in my mind, well, that might be a solution, or that might be a solution. Generally, I find myself very liberal on most issues, I think. I feel like I've let this exposing lunatics. Thank you for joining us with the extremely controversial point of view. I have to disagree straight off the bat, I'm afraid, with that position that only biological women are women. Yeah, I completely disagree with that for a number of reasons. Lol, can't fool me with a wig. Yeah, that's a ban, I reckon. I reckon it's gone to that point, probably. Let's get you out of there. Although I'm very much a free speech advocate, as you will, I think the thing is, beyond anything else, you see, you've just called me a snowflake as well. Before, beyond anything else, you're breaking Twitch's TOS, and that's only going to get me in trouble. You can't start insulting people, I'm afraid. Well, you're out of here now anyway, so I'm not talking to you anymore, am I? Because you've been kicked out, presumably. Sorry about that, folks. Genuinely, because, nobody should have to to listen to that. We were having a constructive conversation. Where's everybody joining me from today? Sabala Rabalo, where are you at the moment? And how's it going? He didn't seem to be interested in the discourse, but rather just trolling. Yeah, I don't think he'd even heard what we were talking about, to be honest. I think he probably just maybe jumped in and heard me saying trans, and that's why I kind of said I think it's probably my fault that, as you said, we've moved on from it and started talking about other things. Little Rock, Arkansas. Ah, nice. Very nice. I bet there's a lot of good views around there. I've never been to the States, and I want to go. I want to go in the next year, now that things are opening up, as it were. The money that I've saved from not going anywhere for the last year and a half, I want to go to a trip to the States. I want to go to a trip to Japan. Maybe Arkansas way I'll have to go. No, it's hell. Fair enough. I'll take that one off the list then. I really want to go to... I want to go to New Orleans, and I really want to go to Portland as well. And that kind of tells you a lot about me, I think, when you're asking about what kind of my political ideology is and my political leaning. I like open discourse on everything. I'm very, very live and let live. And I think, in most cases, I think in all cases, to be honest, when somebody approaches me with any kind of identity or point of view, my interest is to basically just get anything that they can tell me that I haven't already heard from them, get all of their life, get all of their information, get all of their life story, and then share that as well with them. I'm generally of the belief that given all of the information on something, people looking to better the interests of human beings, healthcare and achievement, I feel like we arrive relatively in the same place given enough information. That's kind of the philosophy that's driving my stream, I suppose, is that I am not looking to, I said this right at the start, I'm not looking to say that I'm an expert in anything, because I'm not. And I'm not looking to preach any particular side. I, first of all, am more interested in learning, hearing about things from people like yourselves who know things that I don't, and then also just sharing everything and letting us all just learn more about these things. Sorry, that's a very long answer. Greetings over in Mexico, Sabola Robalo. Michoacan, I think that's how you pronounce that. Sounds interesting. I'd love to go to Mexico as well. Very unaccepting in Arkansas. Portland is nice. I have a friend there. Yeah, I'd love to go to Portland. I think I might head off to bed now, but I loved having this conversation of trans people and treatment for dysphoria. Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you. Thank you and good night. Yeah, thanks for joining. Hopefully see you on the next stream. And yeah, thanks for telling me the information about that as well. You've kind of, I think, helped me get to a point where I can kind of treat this kind of debate better as well, because I don't know enough, so it's always good to be told things that help me get to a better position with it, kind of figure out where I do stand with it. So yeah, thank you. Let's have a look and see. I think there was another story that I wanted to jump into. Ah, yes. Where are we? I'll bring it up. it was Dominic Cummings's latest intervention into politics. The man who is going on a complete PR transformation of himself through the incredibly effective method of leaking things about our government, which is always entertaining. So here we have today, well, last night I believe, Boris Johnson, a pundit who stumbled into politics, says Cummings. Dominic Cummings is the former political advisor of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Former aide says in a Substack Q&A that Number 10 is now just a branch of the entertainment industry. That reminds me of the quote from New York Times journalist who famously, he didn't famously pronounce it, but it always sticks in my head, who said of the last presidential election, the one before last, is everything wrestling? Which I think to this day is one of my favourite article headlines. It's the idea that Trump and that race to power was the kind of political moment where before, and you know, as never before, it became indistinguishable from the WWE, basically. Especially when you can see there, that's Trump at WrestleMania in 2007. He's always known how to get more publicity and where to place himself, especially because wrestling is this incredibly vibrant celebration of American identity in many ways. You know, that's the more I think about it, being a guest star in a wrestling show is fucking smart. And you know, for all his faults, and there is a fucking lot of faults, he did identify that, for him at least, causing as much trouble and becoming, you know, a massive television personality was definitely a valuable thing politically. You know, and I just wish that the Democrats were more versed in that sometimes, but I think they're learning the value of celebrity. And you know what? Actually, Obama knew it for sure. So maybe I'm talking shit. Maybe that's not that true, because Obama certainly knew the value of celebrity. And Cummings knows it as well. Downing Street under Boris Johnson is a branch of the entertainment industry, and nothing will get done in terms of serious policy focus until he leaves, Dominic Cummings has said in his latest blast at his former boss. In a question and answer session with paid subscribers to his Substack newsletter, Johnson's former chief advisor described the Prime Minister as a pundit who stumbled into politics and acts like that 99% of the time. Giving evidence to MPs last month, Cummings criticised Johnson as completely unfit to be Prime Minister, describing him as media-obsessed and like a shopping trolley smashing from one side of the aisle to the other. On Monday, answering a question on the potential cybersecurity threat to the UK if another country develops human-level artificial intelligence. This is supposedly Cummings' area of interest outside of straight politics, is things like big tech and how AI and things like that can be put to use, but also the dangers of them. He's a bit of a geek, in short, much like myself. So yeah, that's why he's been asked about things like this. Cummings wrote that this would be huge, potentially given with those with AGI. So that's artificial general intelligence. Okay. Cummings wrote that this would be huge, potentially giving those with AGI the power to subdue everyone and destroy us all. So not too dramatic then. Cummings said that if he had stayed at number 10, he was dismissed in November, he would have ordered a focus on the threat, but this would not happen under Johnson. I'm wondering if the argument that there was too much going on is a good one. But not too much to look into it, I suppose, at least. So, all caps, this is because it comes from his blog. Nothing like this now will get a serious focus in number 10. Number 10 now is just a branch of entertainment industry and will stay. So, it must be a tweet, I think, and will stay. So till BJ gone at earliest, he wrote. It's like it's gone into mad rant territory, hasn't it, that part? The most valuable commodity in GVT is focus, and the PM literally believes that focus is a menace to his freedom to do whatever he fancies today. Hence why you see the opposite of focus now, and will do till he goes. Earlier in the lengthy thread, Cummings was asked if he saw Johnson more as a hedgehog or a fox, a reference to a celebrated Isaiah Berlin essay that categorised people into those who inhabit one central idea and those with a broader view. Okay, that's quite good, I like that, hedgehog or fox. He replied, neither. He's a pundit who stumbled into politics and acts like that 99% of the time, but 1% not, and that 1% is why pundits misunderstand him / underestimate him. Okay. I'm going to have to jump off in about 5 minutes, by the way, folks. Thank you very much for joining. He's a pundit who stumbled into politics. I don't know if even before I read this story, I kind of was in a disagreement with him because I don't know if Johnson stumbled into politics because he, as far as I'm aware, I'm going to Google Johnson wanted to be Prime Minister and see if I can find what I'm trying to say here. As far as I was aware, it doesn't look like, I don't think I'm going to be able to find the exact thing that I'm looking for, but I'm sure that in his kind of biographical knowledge of what we know about Boris Johnson, he's always wanted to be Prime Minister. You know, I think evidence points to, although I can't find that evidence right now, but that is why I disagreed with this story before I read it, because I don't know about this idea of him stumbling into politics. He seems more willed than that, if that's the word. And that is why, that 1% is why pundits misunderstand him, underestimate him. I mean, I certainly don't underestimate him anymore. I think maybe I used to. Among a string of answers covering everything from his admiration for the 19th century German statesman Otto von Bismarck to lessons from the 2016 Vote Leave campaign, Cummings also talked about what he had learned from proximity to power. He wrote, "When you watch the apex of power, you feel like, if this were broadcast, everyone would sell everything and head for the bunker in the hills. It's impossible to describe how horrific decision-making is at the apex of power, and how few people watching it have any clue how bad it is, or any sense of how to do it better. It's generally the blind leading the blind, with a few non-blind desperately shoving fingers in dikes and clutching their heads." This is the general message that he's been putting across since he left number 10 Downing Street and started talking about everything that happens in there. It seems like the message that he wants us to get is that the government doesn't know what the fuck it's doing. as somebody that hopes that the current government gets toppled by Labour and Starmer, I hope he does keep shouting and shouting and shouting about the fact that there's a shit show happening inside government. Not just because the public needs to know it, but because maybe it will make the public actually have a change of heart. The last 2 years have been an absolute shambles. And it seems like only this sense of nationalism and Brexit and the aftermath of Brexit and all the kind of mythical notions around that seem to be propping up Johnson. But I feel like that is it. I feel like that's all that's doing it in a lot of cases. So I hope that we can transition from this point of nationalism and politics to a point where we actually examine the facts and the data. Fingers crossed. Right, I'm going to leave it there, folks. Thank you so very much for joining me on this stream. I've had a great time. Had some really interesting conversations. So, everybody take care. I'll be back on tomorrow, midday. I may come on a bit earlier because it's been quite good today. So I may come on a bit earlier as well. But yeah, I'll be on tomorrow. Thank you very much for the follows. Thank you very much for the conversations. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you later.